Hi, Peter. How are you?
Hey, nice to meet you, Rachel.
Nice to meet you. With I'm very excited that like rom-coms are kind of back in the way that they are, and I do love that this movie uses the flashbacks to tell their love stories. But I like how you filmed it very much. I'm
Oh, thank
fascinated
you.
by these characters still getting to exist as a couple in that world versus the easy choice of just telling a story in a
Right.
flashing back. For you, what was the fun of getting to kind of incorporate them in the modern time into these flashbacks that we get to see?
Well, what I loved about it is that it wasn't just a fun choice. It wasn't just an aesthetic choice, but it really made sense for the story and these characters. There's a line that Lucy has toward the end of the movie where she says, "I usually feel so alone in my memories, but it was like as we've been talking today, it's almost like you were there with me." And so we actually show that
Mhm.
um, by having them appear in each other's flashbacks. And so I liked that it kind of that it really made sense that, and it really resonated with me that that is part of the challenge of carrying around the baggage of these memories is that we're just kind of alone with them, and finding someone that we can talk to who's um, who listens with acceptance and compassion and that we can be vulnerable to is such a gift. And that's really, a foundation for this story. That's what made me want to tell it and share it with the world. So finding an aesthetic that that supported that and carried that was really exciting.
Yeah, and I like too that these two characters, like, this is one day of their life. Like, it's not an extended
Yes.
period. And so I do love how that kind of is like we're reminded it's one day throughout the whole movie. So it's not,
Yeah.
oh yes, they do fall in love. It's all just about their draw to each other. And when you're working with actors, what would you guys kind of do to like make sure that that balance hits? So then we do know that these people aren't, head over heels in love with each other, but they have that connection and that draw.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a really good question because it does happen so fast. And so how do you kind of not make it like a cheesy love at first sight? I think that um there's it's a bit of a slow burn, even though it happens in one day and you have, the stakes of that. It's a slow burn, and you have these two characters that are both wounded and they've had bad experiences in the past, and so their guards are up, and so the way that that guardedness comes out, and in they're not just immediately in love, even though they immediately hook up. It's not, you know, it's uh it's coming from a different place. But as the story progresses, it's really beautiful to see as they start to question, could this be different than what I've had in the past?
Yeah, and I like, I don't want to call them, it's not like big reveals or spoilers because it's a romantic comedy, but like I do love that as these characters are learning about each other, they both have like that one secret that they don't want to tell until it comes out and they have to explain
Right.
why they kept that one the secret.
Yeah.
When you're mapping things like that out to make it work, both with the performances of the actors as well as within the movie as a whole, what is your kind of trick to making sure like those still feel like big reveals, like this is like a superhero movie where I'm like, oh my God, but I'm like, these are just normal people.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of, I think, a bigger balance that I'm always looking to strike of how to tell a story that's that's fun and entertaining and cinematic, but also really grounded and human and accessible emotionally for an audience. So that's something that we were constantly navigating with the actors and with everybody on the crew to find that tonal balance. Specifically for some of those twists, I mean, you have to give credit to the Keith Bunin, the screenwriter, who structured the story beautifully so that it feels like one continuous story, but we have all these different flashbacks and then some of these twists, and that at the same time are exciting and interesting and keep us engaged, but are also natural and organic and earned. And I think that um, part of my job in working with the actors was thinking through, okay, we're doing this scene that is, on 15 minutes into the movie, and we have to, keep in mind that 70 minutes into the movie, this is going to happen. And so this is, you have this in mind, when you're saying this. And sometimes little adjustments like that can impact a performance and give it a certain specificity that you you know a, a casual viewer might not pick up the first time, but maybe if they watch the movie again, be like, oh, right in that moment they're thinking about this.
Mm.
And so, trying to give those layers.
Yeah, and I know it's just the setting that was written. However, it did remind me of like rom-coms anyway, because you're in this beautiful beach town. Like I instantly
Yeah,
thought of Something's Gotta Give because I was just like, well, they're in the Hamptons the entire time.
right.
But were there little nods that you guys wanted to do to like the romantic comedy genre? Because it does feel like it fit right back in with the 90s and early 2000s of the like prime of the rom-com.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some quotes, more or less direct of some of the great rom-coms, When Harry Met Sally, a, a recent one that came out that's I don't know if too many of people have seen it, called The Worst Person in the World. It's a Norwegian film. Highly
No.
recommend it.
Okay.
There's a shot in the movie that I took straight out of that movie just because I loved it so much. That's a direct quote. But yeah, one of the things I love about rom-coms is that there's such a great history to the genre. It's almost like working in film noir or mystery, where it's like there are expectations of the genre. And so how do you kind of pay homage to those, but at the same time make something that feels fresh and current and, navigating that. One of the things that I liked about this story is that it thematized the sense of history, right? Both of these characters are struggling with the weight of their past and struggling to let go of some of those bad experiences that they can move on. And so part of the aesthetic of the movie, I wanted to find locations and wardrobe and music that had that sense of history. And so I think that it contributes to that theme, but it also, um, I think, gives the movie a timeless feel. But it's at the same time really specific, but also universal and timeless. Like this movie could have come out any time in the last 5 decades. That was what I was hoping for.
Yeah. And for a last quick question, I do rom-coms are always like we know what we want out of them for the most part. I think this one has so many different layers to it. And so what do you hope audiences take away when they get to see Which Brings Me to You?
It's a great question. What comes to mind is this line um, that Nat says, um, sometime in the second act, where he says, um, you know, they've confessed all these things to each other. And he says, what do you do when you've told someone how messed up you are and they don't run for the hills?
Mhm.
And that was what really grabbed me about this movie, that it's a movie that celebrates communication in a relationship, talking and listening deeply to another person, and how when we communicate um, in that way with someone, it invites us to be open, and it invites us to grow in hope that maybe we can, accept ourselves more in the presence of this person that's accepting us. And so that was, I wanted for the whole movie um, to be like that for the audience, an exercise in that, so that we're listening to these characters, we're loving them unconditionally, we're rooting for them and invested in them. And so when we leave the movie, I hope that people have a sense of hope for themselves and for their own relationships, that they can be more open and communicate, um, and that there is the possibility to find greater love and happiness in that. And I also want people to just have a good time,
And
have
I
some
think
laughs, and yeah.
I think they will. I love the movie a lot, so thank you so much for talking with me today, and I can't wait for people to get to see it.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.